Testing, 1, 2, testing, testing, testing. Hi, this is Jesse Alexander, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the National Radio Astronomy Observatory's Ham Radio project. I'm going to be talking about how we build inclusive futures for BIPOC and LGBTQIA learners in STEM education with amateur radio. Let's get started. This is how I start. I start every class, by the way, just to help us get centered and focused. All right, we're going to talk about STEM identity. STEM identity is something I learned about at the last IEEE meeting with regards to STEM, the Integrated STEM Conference of 2023, to be precise. And I learned about it during one of the keynotes, keynote 3, with Dr. Dwight Carr. And it was my first exposure to STEM identity. So I am centering this particular conversation around the concept of STEM identity because I believe that it's important. So STEM identity involves students asking or interrogating their environment, themselves, and their community about their identity and how they fit in STEM. How do they demonstrate competence, performance, and recognition? How do they get recognition and give recognition in that community? We're also going to be talking about Ubuntu and how the STEM identities connect with each other, how they relate to each other. Ubuntu is a South African concept popularized by Bishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela, which basically says, I am because we are. All right, now we're going to talk about how essential BIPOC were and are integral to wireless communications. First, there was the drum, of course, which is probably the first form of wireless communication. Here we have a lot later, we have Lilbert Young, who was an early pioneer in radio technology as it was just beginning. One of the analogies I like to use with our students is that at one time, wireless communications radio was like the AI back in the day. Here we have two code talkers, probably from the Dene Nation, who are actually communicating using native language. And the advantage of using native language, as you probably have heard, or I should say using indigenous languages known only in the United States, was that messages could be passed without the enemy, in this case, I believe the Germans, being able to interpret the conversation. Here we have Dr. West. Dr. Gladys West was one of the pioneers in the development of GPS technology. Here we have Rufus Turner, who was a polymath with degrees both in English and engineering, and he wrote reference books, engineering reference books, and you can find all about it online. He was one of the first Black ham radio operators, the first, Whiskey 3 Lima Foxtrot. Here's Jesse Russell. Jesse Russell hired me out of Howard University into basically wireless technologies and introduced me to wireless technologies. I worked with him off and on for the 17 years I was at Bell Labs. And you can find out all about him. He has multiple patents, all of them related to 0G through probably 4 or 5G technologies. This is the other Dr. West, right? This is Dr. James West, who co-invented the electric microphone, which is in every single wireless device that we're using, including the microphones on our phones and the microphones in the camera that I'm using for this presentation. You really can't talk about microphones without talking about his innovation and his team's innovation. And I should say we can't, shouldn't say we can't, but we shouldn't. All right, because what we're showing are people who, had they not existed, what we call wireless communication would not exist. I'm also including a friend and a former colleague that I used to volunteer with, Ken Greenhouse, with Kilo Bravo 3 India Echo, who is a volunteer in multiple ham radio aspects, everything from the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts through to the Community Emergency Response Team and the Amateur Radio Emergency Response Team. He was really an active amateur in the Prince George's County, Maryland area, and he is what we call a silent key, meaning that he has passed away. And I'd like to dedicate this talk to him. All right, so let's talk about STEM identity and what a ham radio operator looks like. Here's a rather, how shall I put it, offensive ad that was popular, I think, back in the day. I think it was in the 20s and 30s. And here we have a ham radio operator who is decidedly male, and the woman of the house, the YL, is giving him some beer and that kind of thing. And you can find out more about the gender politics of ham radio, early ham radio in the 50s, but it's excellent paper by Matthew Willis, really good paper. All right, so we go up a little further, and I should say that part of the motivation for the slide is I'm looking for women, and I'm looking for, in particular, brown women. They could be African American, they can be Indian, they can be, I'm just trying to, Latine, I'm trying to find brown women for this presentation. And so, of course, we came up with Uhuru. Uhuru played a radio operator on the Enterprise. And we move a little forward, and we have Brenda Muhammad, who is a ham radio operator working in a mutual aid organization. She's part of FORCE, which is an organization that is teaching folks in her community everything from CPR to amateur radio. And so she was actually one of the speakers for the class, and it was really great to have her. Really appreciate her. What does a ham radio operator look like? All right, they look like Brenda Muhammad. And like I said, I love this picture of Brenda Muhammad. Brenda Muhammad is a survivor of COVID, and she was actually on a respirator. And so when we spoke the first time, she was learning how to walk again and how to talk. So she's sitting in a walker. Unfortunately, though, she's not holding a radio or a microphone. So I'm still trying to find Black women or brown women using radio. So let's fast forward a little bit. A few years ago, there were new license manuals published. And I should say they were published after I showed this slide to other audiences. I wish I could take credit for the ARRL putting Rhonda Leonard, Kilo Charlie 1, Kilo Yankee November on the cover, but I don't know that I can. But it's very interesting that the two very popular books used to study for the general class license have brown women on the cover. And if I had something to do with that, I love the result regardless. All right, moving on. Teachable moment from my own life. What does a ham radio operator look like? I showed up at one of the first events for this project. And I was asked, are you sure you're in the right place? And I joked, and I said, yeah, I saw the cars with the antennas outside, and I've got a radio in my pocket. I assume I am the right place. Um, and I was asked multiple times. I joked about it, but uh, there was a problem, and it actually took one of the people who invited me for the presentation to actually speak up and say, "That's Jesse. He's here to give the presentation. Why are you interfering?" And the person actually sat down and stopped messing around with me. But had I been younger, had I been in a not so good mood, I probably would have left, and we would not be having this conversation. This is the importance, and this is what discrimination does. It doesn't just hurt Black folks or the targets of the discrimination, but we've got 30 students. We've have 30 students are passing through this program. That would not happen if I were discouraged by that discrimination, of course. And the other point I wanted to make is this happened only a year ago. We've already gone through, we've had the whole Black Lives Matter and the protests that were all over the world. And uh, I'm still dealing with this question. Is my Black male body in the right place? Right? You know, all right, so let's move on. How amateur radio, I believe, supports uh, ham radio STEM identity? One of the core parts, the core aspects of ham radio are clubs. And they're clubs that are based on identity, like Pride, the Pride Radio Group, and OMIC, which is a organization of predominantly African American amateurs. And then we have the YL Young Ladies Relay League, which is also which is a club open to women and those who identify as femme. We have the Young Amateur Radio Organization Club. You can say that they're also identity-based because they're a youth, and they're a virtual club that works primarily on Discord. And then we have the traditional clubs like um, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. And these organizations actually engage in uh, activities that access all three of these organizations. The clubs allow people the freedom and those that are members of the club access to all of these aspects of their STEM identity. And of course, no conversation about clubs would be complete without talking about the main club, the ARRL, Amateur Radio Relay League, which is this nation's premier club, if you will, or the primary club that reports to the International Amateur Radio Union. Um, and every country that has radio service, amateur radio service, has an organization very much like the ARRL. All right, and then there's clubs that are based on interests, like the FISTS Club, which is basically about Morse code and keeping the concept of Morse code alive. And one of the other kinds of clubs or organizations are of course, the Amateur Radio Volunteer Examiner Coordinators of EECs. And I've got two examples listed here. They help this kind of STEM, collective STEM, and individual STEM identity. They keep it going, so to speak, and make it sustaining, because these folks test new amateurs. And I guess, if you will, if you want to say it that way, they bring new people into the institution, into the hobby of amateur radio. And of course, we have instructors. And there are at least one or two regimes that certify amateur radio instructors. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm an ARRL instructor, and we have access to more stuff, more materials, and that kind of thing that we could use to help create new amateurs, making STEM identity, the amateur STEM identity, self-sustaining. And of course, there are ways of demonstrating competence and performance, and you can get by getting recognition and awards for certain things that you do inside of ham radio. Some of the things that you can do are there are all kinds of awards. Some of them are automated. There's an award for Morse code proficiency. These two awards are associated with the Parks on the Air program, which started out as a way of uh, getting people to, this is pre-pandemic, getting people involved in the national parks and that kind of thing, and it went completely bonkers and viral. There are people who are setting up remote stations, ham stations in parks, and people like me hunt them and try to make contacts with them, and we get awards. And I'm showing some of the awards here. So this is the way that recognition happens. What you're seeing is basically all three of these pillars or these important aspects of STEM identity and ham radio. And of course, how could I forget the ultimate demonstration of one's competence, and that is getting your license, passing the exam, the FCC exam given by the volunteer examiners. That is the ultimate recognition of your capabilities and your competence and your performance. All right, let's talk about how we in this particular program help our students in developing STEM identity. Well, we have guest speakers come in and talk about specific aspects of amateur radio or the electromagnetic spectrum. We also involve so these speakers, I should say, they speak about not only the technical aspects, but also business and career aspects as well. And so again, this gives students exposure to what it's like to have an identity in STEM and what it takes to sustain that. Of course, we also give the students access to the tools that they need to study for the exam with ham study. And of course, when they get their exam, when they pass their exam, they get a copy of their license, including their call sign, which basically shows that their competency in understanding these concepts. And we can also measure competence and performance on our learning management system known as Supernova, which actually is an instantiation, as they say, of the Moodle and branded instantiation of the Moodle learning management system. And the students get basically all three of these aspects within the Moodle system, within the Supernova system. They can take tests to demonstrate competence and performance, and they get recognition by getting grades. We also give students radios. In this case, we're giving our students a QRZ-1, which is a very well documented radio, actually. And I'm speaking, you can't tell, but I have my invisible technical writer and trainer hat on. And I can say as a tech writer that they've done a really good job. The organization has done a really good job at modifying the manual so that it's readable and useful in programming and setting up one's radio. But not only that, we intend that the students use these radios to contact other students, to connect with hams, and that kind of thing. All right, so, and again, we encourage our students to join organizations. We've encouraged them to join RAH, which is the Rainbow Amateur Radio Association, which is a little bit older than the Pride Network. And I mentioned YARC before. YARC helped us, thanks YARC, shout out to YARC. They helped us set up our Discord server. And of course the ARRL, and I've already mentioned OMIC. We also encourage students to complete their QRZ page. Once you get licensed and get your call sign, you get a page on QRZ.com, and you can go in and customize it. I like to liken QRZ to the LinkedIn of ham radio. It's a way that ham radio operators, it's basically a platform that has multiple uses for ham radio, not the least of which is bragging about your awards. And also it's used, and we actually had one of our guest speakers tell the students how it's used for scholarships, ham radio scholarships. One of the first places that people who are considering students for scholarships, amateur radio scholarships, that is, one of the first places they look are the QRZ pages for that amateur. The other thing that we do to, again, help students demonstrate competence and performance is we use the free application Echolink, which started out as a voice over IP application. And like a lot of things in ham radio, it exploded. And it also has interfaces and connections to all the popular repeaters and certain kinds of bots and all kinds of cool stuff. And we really have had a lot of fun with Echolink. You can connect with Echolink with radios. You can also connect with a laptop or an Android or an iPhone. And so it's kind of an interesting thing to have a training net where we help students practice making contacts and engaging in communications and that kind of thing on Echolink. Echolink is a great example of a free application. There are a lot of amateurs out there that are software developers, and they love creating applications that other hams can use. So again, this is part of the process of our students, learning about themselves and being able to demonstrate the three aspects of STEM identity. All right, let's move on and talk about an aspect that is relatively new that I found out in a great report on the encore.org platform. Encore is an organization that actually at one time was encouraging, and I think they still do, executives that have retired to come back and work for for-profit organizations and nonprofits and help them with problems that they have. And that's how they got started. And they've morphed into a great organization that actually makes grants. So we have we have a divide here. On one side, we have students, young folks who can't find opportunity to work with people of other generations. And they see that as an obstacle. And then on the other side, we have a situation in amateur radio where a lot of amateurs are aging out. The stereotype of a amateur radio operator is an older white male, probably in their 60s to 80s, who likes, of course, loves amateur radio, but also has cats. Okay. So there haven't really been very good studies on the ham radio demographics, but suffice it to say, the ARRL is noticing that there is a aging of the population. So how do we bridge the gap between people over here, the hobby that seems to be losing steam as people start to age out, and people wanting to work across generations? Well, there's a very interesting finding in this report on Encore's site and I'm going to highlight this, that shows that there's widespread interest in young people, particularly Black and Hispanic youth, people of all ages, are especially keen to work across generations. This I see as an opportunity where ham radio fits as a bridge between these, as a solution to this problem here. On one side, we've got folks who are aging out of a hobby, and on the other side, we've got people who are looking for ways, young people who are looking for ways of achieving that STEM identity. And what better way to do that than to bring these communities together, and particularly with a focus on BIPOC folks. Now, one point you might be asking the question, what's so big about this radio hobby? What's important? I want you to keep something in mind here, and this is a little bit off the topic, but I still think it's important. Aside from the GMRS service and the old Citizens Band service, which is, they're still entities, you can still, they're still out, the FCC still regulates them. Ham radio is one of the only services where you as a citizen have direct access to the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, I want you to put that thought process in light, when keep that in mind when you look online and do searches to see how much large corporations, AT&T, others are paying for 5G, for access to 5G spectrum and now 6G spectrum, and that kind of thing. You can see the billions of dollars that is spent to have access to the spectrum. And so it's very important for citizens to have access. And amateur radio, the entry fee is probably less than $40 when you count the exam fee and the fee paid for licensing, which is $35 to the FCC, the federal government. So this is an important thing. So let's talk about how we try to prepare our learners to address barriers to their ham radio identity. One of the first barriers, one of the first questions we often get is, how does this help with my education? A lot of our students, most of them I think, are in college. How does this help with my education? Well, as it turns out, ham radio licensing requires that you pass an exam certifying you know basic electronics, radio propagation, solar weather or space weather, and spectrum management, and also some legal requirements about using radio waves to communicate. If we were to convert this into a class, particularly in electrical engineering, we're talking about networks theory, linear systems, and or filter systems, especially for the general class exam. We're also talking about spectrum management and electronics 101 and propagation theory. And lest we forget, antenna theory, and of course, transmission line theory, right? So those are real courses, and mostly in electrical engineering. And not to mention physics and that kind of thing. And in our course, we actually include some extensions so that young people understand the importance of radio astronomy and that kind of thing. So how does this lead to a job, right? That's one of the questions we get primarily, I think, from parents of our students. And the answer is ham radio. Through ham radio, you get licensed, literally licensed, to engage in hands-on activity that can lead to what I call muscle memory, with regard to how radio systems and wireless systems work. And that is invaluable, right? You actually have hands-on experience that employers are looking for and want. The other aspect to it is more like a fraternity or a sorority. That call sign is an entry into all kinds of fields. When I talk about, of course, this was a long time ago, but when I talk about my job at Bell Labs a long time ago, which was my first engineering job, I, of course, was a ham radio operator. My boss was a ham radio operator. One of his colleagues, same level, was a ham radio operator, and their boss was a ham radio operator. So did they require, or can an employer require that you have a ham radio license? The answer usually is no, because there's a non-pecuniary requirement that's written into the law that creates the amateur radio service. But it sure helps, especially if you're doing anything that has to do with wireless technologies and that kind of thing. But we should keep in mind one other aspect of ham radio is it's a hobby. It's something else that you can do for fun. And that's good to sort of let off steam and that kind of thing. We had had an astronomer, actually an astrophysicist, come and speak to the students. And one of the students asked her, uh, 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 how does ham radio relate to your job, as an astrophysicist? And her response is, it has absolutely nothing to do with my job, which is why I love it. So there is that aspect. I also want to, so there are two articles here that are related to the job issue. I also wanted to talk about support, lack of support. There may even be opposition from the family, and not for nothing. Within amateur radio, there's a lot of jargon and that kind of thing. So, you know, and that's not only off-putting, but it's exclusive. It's not inclusive. Oh, I forgot to mention, Cal Poly symbol is here. If you're really interested to see how amateur radio is used in academic environments, check out Cal Poly. Do a search on Cal Poly and first year amateur radio, uh, 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 first year amateur radio exams or first year amateur radio operators, and you'll see really good information about how Cal Poly uses ham radio for their electrical engineering students throughout the entire curriculum. All right, so back to the support. Um, Clubs also provide support, and we've already talked about that. But one of the most off-putting issues is the way amateurs communicate online, on the air, and the use of jargon. And one of the best ways for getting around that or working with it is to be in clubs and and actually get on the air and talk and not be intimidated. So we encourage our students to do that. The other problem is time. How do you have free time to do this? Well, in our course, we ask students to make a commitment up front to the 20 weeks of the program, and we pay them a stipend to be involved. And of course, we cover all the licensing fees and all of that kind of thing as well, so that there are no barriers and that, yes, you can have the time because you're actually getting paid. Uh, and that's part of it, also maps back into the uh, job readiness or career or entrepreneurship readiness that is actually part of the curriculum as well. All right, discrimination. Discrimination, harassment, fear of discrimination, imposter syndrome is another question that comes up. We give our students anti-harassment training from the Right to Be organization. And I also want to emphasize here, we also help folks. I was talking about the off-putting language and that kind of thing. We also help students develop their own language and use their own languages and on ham radio so that they can include each other. Uh, and this particular article is really good. It talks about how Black CB operators and ham radio operators created space for themselves on the air, even in times that were quite discriminatory. The other question we get a lot is what about access to mentorship for our learners? Club membership is very important, and we emphasize that. You can get mentors through clubs, and of course, I'm happy to act as a mentor, and there's some advisors to the program and others who are also willing to mentor. We actually recently did a training net where I just called a random person, Random Ham, and he turned out to be a retired NASA scientist living in Florida. Very nice person, and he talked with the students and answered their questions. So mentoring is also accessible through the actual radio itself. Now, the other question that comes up a lot is the equipment for ham radio can be very expensive. And I can say, so I have a couple answers for that. there are a lot of great tools that hams have developed for each other that some of them are my favorite price, free, that are made under open source licensing, or in some cases, some private licensing. And they're out there on the internet. You can download them and play around with them. There's been a very interesting change in technology since I worked in the wireless space, and that change involves basically shifting a lot of functions into software. So you'll see a lot of these free tools run on computers or laptops or tablets and that are connected to radios. And in some cases, you actually need a radio. In some cases, you don't, like with Echolink. So there are a lot of free applications, and there's stuff that you can access right now that it's on the web. Like for example, I'm thinking of Web SDR, which is one of the applications we use which is basically a bunch of receivers that people all over the world have built that you can access from anywhere. And there's also remote amateurs I think it's remoteamateurradio.com and remote ham radio. And these are two situations where I guess you could say projects where amateurs are basically sharing their equipment for free, in particular to young operators. Um, so basically, you can come in through the internet and access a radio and play around with it. Again, at my favorite price, free. So the other aspect of this, and this is a tougher kind of question, is what happens. A lot of students lack the basics: internet, power, clean water. They live in food deserts. They're health hazards. Some folks live in cancer alleys. And these are big questions. They're very big questions. They're a lot bigger than our program. Uh, and the answer I think that is often given is we have to have diversity in all sectors. We have to encourage students and young people to join organizations. Well, who decides? But some of this is much bigger than that. I mean, who decides where, for example, power plants should be placed? There's a big struggle in my part of Southern Maryland about basically having too many power plants. Well, how does that affect you as a ham radio operator, right? How does ham radio deal with that, or your STEM identity in ham radio deal with that? It doesn't really do that. And so there are limitations to this program, but we have to be mindful of these barriers that our students face in this program. So that's partly why I'm mentioning these large problems. And there's a very good article, disturbingly great, about that talks about why STEM, as the author feels, is failing. And actually, I don't agree that it's failing. I think, or better put, failure should be assessed in terms of headwinds or the barriers that students face and that the people who are supposed to benefit from these programs face. That's very important. You can't just say something failed when there are people and organizations who are at the very best doing the least they can to support the organization, and at their worst are actually are in active opposition to DEI and diversity programs. And we know who these folks are, right? All right, I'm just going to give a summary of the program and tell you where we are. We have the first wave, or the first cohort of 10 learners is complete. And I should say this program is generously funded by the Amateur Radio Digital Communications Organization. And We are in flight with the second cohort that had 20 slots, but I think we're down to around 13 students. This organization is a safe place, of course, for our project is a safe place for BIPOC and LGBTQIA folks. And we're teaching the students STEM. We're also teaching them giving them job training and job skills. And while they're doing some fun hands-on activities, and here's some of our students and one of the program managers building crystal radios. We also want to give an on-ramp for our students into a hobby that involves connecting with other people, both technically as well as personally. And we want to encourage Ubuntu, to use the South African phrase again, and that is, I am because we are. Our identities are bound up and connected together. And so we attempt to be an on-ramp for our students to clubs. And who knows, we may even at some point form a club of our alumni. This is where we are in the timeline. We are on wave 2. There are 2 more steps in the project that need to take place after this particular cohort, wave 2, graduates with their general class licenses. We're going to go through a review process, and there'll be a refactoring of our curriculum before release. And then eventually we will release all of our content, and I'll talk more about that. It will be released as open source. All right, so these are the next steps for the content. In the short term, we're going to release our content as a website. And for anyone to use, anyone to look at, anyone to comment on, and we'll set that up. And then in the long term, we're going to give instructors and students access to the learning management system. But not surprisingly, there's some legal aspects we have to work through if minors, people under 18, have access to the learning management system. And I should draw an arrow that goes from here to here, because this website is generated by the learning management system. And so we have what they call in the industry single sourcing. We're going to modify the site, clean things up a little bit. It's already good, but we want to make it excellent, and we're going to be drawing on the help of teachers and others. And there'll be more about that when how you can help in the next part of this. So, so that's basically that. Let me take a moment. My throat's dry. Okay, moving on. So like I said, the curriculum has STEM aspects. There's aspects that encourage camaraderie, and in this case, we call it cohort building. There'll be ceremonies and graduation support, and also all of this material will be released on the NRAO website, through the NRAO website and catalog as Creative Commons. All right, so let's just talk about the first cohort briefly. I'm showing the demographics as the students have entered. We had 10 slots, and there were 9 that we selected. And there's some interesting notes here. 3 were from the Agnes Scott College, and they came in through a connection with an NRAO employee. And there was 1 from my alma mater, Howard University, who came in via a connection with me. We had a field trip to the HAMSci organization, which is HAMSci Workshop. HAMSci is another ARDC supported organization, and so it was great to work with them, and it was a lot of fun going on this field trip. And I basically presented a similar slide deck to what you're seeing now. This is how the program ended. so to speak, for this particular cohort, Wave 1. Um, we were able to end the program with 2 upgraded general licenses, and this is the race and ethnicity of the folks involved. I should say the Agnes Scott College folks may be interested in starting a collegiate program, a collegiate club. There are a lot of great college clubs on a lot of campuses, and it would be good if the folks are actually thinking about doing that. Wave 2. Again, this is our makeup going into the 17 selected. In this case, we've got 2 from the College of William and Mary, and they came on recommendation from one person from Wave 1. So that was great. So one of the running jokes in our particular in Wave 2 is that the folks on the College of William and Mary's campus, they're just one person shy of being able to form an amateur club, which is similar to the folks in Agnes Scott. So who knows, maybe we'll get lucky and there might be 2 clubs formed. During this particular wave, we actually made a trip to the GBO. There were 4 students who were actually only, yeah, there were 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 3 students actually able to go with us. Unfortunately, there were no BIPOC learners. And one of the missions that I have for the next iteration of this project is to figure out what was going on there. We had some last minute cancellations and that kind of thing. We're going to go to Hampsci again this year. This time, the students will be presenting a poster and a briefing, and that's actually going to be happening really soon. So we're looking forward to that. We're in the process of having the students, we're in the part of the curriculum where we're having the students upgrade their technician's licenses to general licenses. And here's the racial makeup. Some of the students, the way they answered the survey was kind of interesting. So all this shows is that 30%, 33% were white, 66% were actually African American. And I should say there's one person of South Asian extraction who is supporting us as a teacher's assistant. So that's basically our makeup. And here are the identifications of that class. All right. Here are the next steps for our learners. We saw before the next steps for the content. Now we're talking about the learners. So we're going to either start a club or help students start clubs that can act as their home base. And I spoke about the importance of clubs providing all 3 aspects of STEM identity and helping students develop them. There's a strong interest amongst the students to be involved in emergency response. So we're going to help them get tied into with organizations like the ITDRC and of course ARIES and CERT and that kind of thing. And we also want our cohorts after this program to be self-sustaining and hopefully some of our students will volunteer to be volunteer examiners and or instructors, and that will make our cohort self-sustaining and self-supporting even after the project is done. All right. So how do we need your help? How can you help us? Well, we need friendly clubs for our students to be part of. And so we're looking for places that are specifically open to people who are BIPOC and LGBTQIA, obviously, and also by age. So if you're part of a club or in a club or starting a club, please contact me and let me know because it would be really cool to connect some of our students. Our students are from all over the country, and it would really be good if you are part of a great club, especially if it's virtual and or near one of our students, to know about it. And so please contact. Um, we're we want to emphasize, we want to get mentors for our students, but we want to emphasize co-learning over knowledge banking. We want to emphasize um, the idea of students teaching uh, 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 older folks, and older folks, older hams or hams that are, quote, more experienced, teaching young folks. Usually this is only one way, from the elders to the youth. But I think there's a lot of things, and I think it's better to engage students if they are actually contributing and creating, helping create the knowledge. So I think it's very important that we encourage that. We're looking for teachers, STEM teachers in particular. We've got a we've got we want to test our EMS curriculum, and we also have we're also developing a catalog of courses uh, that will be useful in the future. Well, not in the future, soon, like future, like within the year, uh, uh, for for teachers who are working in K through 12 environments. Our program, my particular program, the ham radio program up here, you can see the QR code for that. We're looking for teachers to help us test and redesign our content so it would be more effective. So continuous improvement. And this QR code down here is for another program that we're involved in called the Spectrum X program. And there we're looking for teachers to connect with and help us redevelop our content in the Spectrum Management catalog. So these are two opportunities for teachers that we're looking for. All right, what questions do you have? All right, hearing none. Since I'm making a recording, I'll just go right to how you can contact me and find out more about the program. If you scan this QR code, you'll get a contact on your iPhone or your Android phone. And I'd be happy to hear from you. You can send me, it tells you all about how to send messages and call me and that kind of thing. I also want to rethink our friends over at the ARDC. They are very hands-on funders. They have been assisting with kind words and encouragement and ideas throughout this project, and I'm looking forward to working with them further as we approach release of our project. That's it. Everyone, 7 threes, and take care.